I really tried to avoid it, but I can't anymore. The Browns have to play nice with Deshaun Watson for 2025, but the outlook doesn't change for his future with the franchise. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast, and proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Could Deshaun Watson end up back under center for the Browns in 2025? My read on the situation at this stage of the offseason. The most intriguing position battle after the quarterback competition, and will 2025 be the last year of David Njoku in a Browns uniform? I do want to thank you for being an everydayer with the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well. And it's totally free to you. Just hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And, of course, the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. You can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comments section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. The Cleveland Browns have an interesting situation percolating on their hands in regards to Deshaun Watson. And from the sounds of it, I mean, listen, he's posting his videos on Instagram as he tends to do. He's working out at the facility, throwing the guys on the team in the field house. He doesn't have a boot on his foot anymore. His recovery timeline seems like it's been accelerated. He's working his way back, and he keeps talking about how he's going to continue to prove people wrong and that the grind continues and whatever else. And you got reports out there that the door hasn't necessarily closed on him, returning to this team at some point and playing. And I want to pump the brakes on all of this for a second, because it's easy to say these things and speculate on these things on May 20th, May 21st, whatever day this all sort of started popping up this week, whatever. Listen, it's a slow time of year. Storylines like this get some traction. They build momentum, and people start to freak out about him. I don't know. I don't know that any of us can say wholeheartedly that Deshaun Watson is going to play for the Browns in 2025, or frankly, ever again. Now, is it a possibility? Is it something that could happen? Sure. There is a chance that he still ends up back on the field and plays for the Browns this year, but there's a lot that still has to happen. Andrew Berry, I think the Browns' thought process on all this is to slow play the situation. They're not going to rush him back. They're going to let him take his time. Maybe he wants to rush back, but you, as a fan of the NFL in general, take a look around at guys who have come back from Achilles ruptures and tell me if all of them looked like they were ready. Like Aaron Rodgers was talking about coming back in record time and playing during the season that he got hurt in, and then it didn't happen. I've speculated that I don't even necessarily think he was ever really going to come back. I think it was all just for the storyline of this heroic comeback from Aaron Rodgers if they were in the playoff picture to try to pull something off like that. I don't think he was really going to, though. And then he came back last year, and he didn't look like the same Aaron Rodgers. And I get it, different age groups for these two guys. Deshaun Watson's in his early 30s. Aaron Rodgers is in his 40s. It's different in terms of the recoveries and how their body heals and all those different things. But anybody who's ruptured their Achilles, it usually takes time to really get back to being any remnants of the player that you were before. And for a player like Deshaun Watson, the most important thing that injury maybe limits or takes away from him is his athleticism, his ability to make plays with his feet and be explosive as a runner. And that's supposed to be one of the biggest traits, the best traits that he brings to the table. So the Browns could slow play this thing however they want. They could say, well, he's not back to being himself, so we're not going to put him back out there. Now, listen, there are some legalities, if you will, within the league that have to be sort of considered here. The Browns can't, this isn't like baseball. In baseball, we get these, fun folktale stories of well, hey, they put this guy on the IR because he was just struggling and they had to kind of, I don't want to say make up, but they sort of flubbed or over emphasized like an injury that maybe was just like a small thing to get them on the IR or the IL rather, and give them a chance to recover and get their heads right before they come out and pitch again. Like we see this all the time in baseball. It happens on occasion where they sort of, fudge the books a little bit on what the injury is. I don't know how much that happens in the NFL. I'm sure there's some of that going on, but I do think in the grand scheme of things, like you have to consider, like if he's able to come back and play and he's healthy and he's cleared by doctors, and that is the biggest thing. What constitutes being cleared? If the Browns doctors are sitting there saying like, we still don't think he's ready, then that's the Browns doctors saying that he's not cleared. And so how they handle that remains to be seen. But like, you don't want to also put yourself in position to run into a problem with the NFLPA if you prolong bringing him back, even though he says he's ready. So you have to sort of play this thing, as by the book as possible. You have to be careful with the way that you assess this. But I do think they're going to take their time. They're going to be patient with it. My guess, here's the other thing. Like in theory, the Browns could get to week 1 and decide he's not ready. We don't know if there's going to be room for him on this roster. We're putting him on the IR now. And if they put him on the IR before the season starts, his season's over. That's it. He's done. They could do that, and that might make him mad. But if they don't deem him close to being ready to return, and that's their assessment, that's why, medical opinions, you go get second ones oftentimes, and you see what other people are saying, and maybe he would do something like that. But if the Browns decide he's not ready and they put him on the IR from the start of the season, his season's over. My guess on what will happen here, though, is that they'll probably end up putting him on the PUP list with the idea that he'll return at some point. And once you're on the PUP list, you have 5 weeks after those initial first 4 weeks that you have to miss, to then try to return. You could prolong that. You could wait till the 5th week to bring him back. And then you have an additional, I think it's 3 weeks to activate them from this is the same situation that happened with Nick Chubb last year, to activate them to the active roster. So that gives you like 12 weeks before you even have to think about Deshaun Watson potentially playing for this team. And maybe they bring him back and maybe he'd be in the room. I still don't think they're going to put him out there on the field. You can tell me I'm crazy. You can tell me if he's healthy, they probably would try. And listen, this organization has done some boneheaded things over the years, so maybe they would. But my guess on my feeling and read on the situation is that they have to play nice for now. They have to give him access to the facility, which we're seeing in his videos on Instagram, that he's out there practicing, trying to get work in. They have to, assess the injury situation as things come and decide if they think he's ready to potentially come back and play. They're going to have to abide by the NFLPA standards for those types of situations to deem if he can come back, to put him back on the active roster or not. And if they decide he's not ready, then I guess he won't be ready. But they have to be careful with that, and they have to sort of play this one by the book, and they have to play nice for now. But to me, this changes nothing in the grand scheme of Deshaun Watson's future with this team. I think that the things that Jimmy Haslam said at the owners' meetings, I think the way that this organization went about their offseason and their draft philosophy, frankly, you drafted 2 rookies. You drafted 2 rookie quarterbacks. Are you really going to, because we've already talked about like too many cooks in the kitchen. Who's the odd man out between Flacco, Pickett, Shador, and Gabriel? Who is it? You're going to add a 5th quarterback into that mix and then have to maybe part ways with one of those rookies? I don't think so. I think they want to see both those guys through and determine if one of them can be a legitimate quarterback for them. Like I just don't see a world where that's going to be the case in who you move on from in that scenario. So like, and also there's also this factor. There's also the factor of they traded back, got the Jacksonville pick, the extra Jacksonville pick, and set themselves up to next year potentially draft a quarterback if they wish, if they decide that neither of these guys are their guy. And so they've positioned themselves to pivot at the quarterback position after this year. They're going to play nice. They're going to say the right things right now. They're going to let Deshaun do what he needs to do to try to recover, because they have to. They can't not allow those things to happen. But this changes nothing for me. Even if he plays games in 2025, it changes nothing for me in terms of this team being ready to move on from the Deshaun experience and try their hand at drafting and developing a true franchise quarterback. That's the direction this team is heading, in my opinion. That's the direction they're going to go. And no matter how this goes in 2025, I think this stage is still set for them to make him a post-June 1st cut. come next offseason, and they'll split his money between 2026 and 2027, and they'll be moving on here, and the book will be closed on the Deshaun Watson era, as disastrous as it was. Speaking of the quarterback position, everyone will be watching the QB competition this summer. But the second most intriguing position battle is, I'll reveal it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner who works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn Jobs clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. Post Your Job is LinkedIn's new feature, which can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. It's no wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helped them find high quality hires. I know over the years, I've had people reach out to me about job opportunities through LinkedIn. It is a great place to find future employees for your business. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Today's show is brought to you by Epicor. Every team knows the value of hard work and taking pride in what you build and practicing every detail to get the best results. But no one player, no matter how amazing, can do it all alone. Working together makes getting the win easier. At Epicor, the all-stars are the hardworking manufacturers and distributors who create and deliver the things we all need, from aerospace to electrical to medical devices. Epicor ERP solutions are created by industry experts to help make every day easier. Seeing your whole supply chain is easier. Managing logistics is easier. Responding to price changes, also easier. From small businesses with big dreams to growing enterprises with a global vision, we'll equip you with the right tools to move forward, think ahead, and lead the way. Because as the clock ticks down, you need to make the most of every hardworking minute. Easier doesn't cut corners. Easier finds the lane. Discover your success at www.easierwithepicor.com. That's www.easierwithepicor.com. So obviously it's going to be all eyes on the quarterback competition for the Cleveland Browns, both at OTAs that are in minicamp coming up here in a couple weeks, and then most notably at training camp, where the things really get turned up a notch leading up to the start of the regular season. We know this. That's the competition. Everybody wants to see who emerges from that. Will it be one of the rookies? Will it be Shedeur Sanders? Will it be Joe Flacco? Will it be Kenny Pickett, who's the odd man out? We have had that conversation already a ton on this show. We'll continue to have that conversation a ton on this show because it's going to be the thing that dominates the Cleveland Browns offseason and the Cleveland Browns training camp and leading up to 2025. So that conversation will be had. But as that takes the center stage, I think there's some other interesting position battles on this team. And don't forget, like, this Browns team is a team right now that is currently in sort of flux. They're in a transitional period. They are looking to improve themselves, build the roster out through the draft, which is what Angel Berry tried to do with the 7 guys that he took the last month. And so a number of these positions are kind of in flux and in rebuild situations. And so understanding that, I think, is important because it's not just the quarterback position that has questions. There are other roles on this team. Now, I think there's some places people will point and say, well, this is an intriguing one. Safety, for example, is one of those ones. You got Ronnie Hickman, but you also got DeMonte Casey, who they added. They got Rayshon Jenkins, who they added to that group as well. Like, there's going to be some interesting competition there to see who comes out on top. Will it be Hickman? Will it be somebody else? I think that on the offensive side of the ball, left tackle, DeJuan Jones is going to be first up. I talked about that yesterday, but who is going to maybe challenge him a little bit? I don't necessarily think it's as much of a challenge as we thought it might be, because I thought we all believed the Browns might take a an offensive tackle in the draft, and they didn't, and that would sort of open up a different competition there. So that one seems like it's more so just seeing what DeJuan brings to the table before they make any changes. But there's some interesting position battles. We know this. But to me, after the quarterback position, the most important, or the most intriguing rather, position battle that I'm going to be watching is going to be who is up first, who gets first dibs at the defensive end spot opposite of Myles Garrett. Because there are some interesting candidates here for this role. And these are guys who have, I think, started to emerge and started to show some things, but haven't necessarily fully proven it on the field just yet. And so there's some work to be done here. And I'm curious, like, who maybe emerges from the group and takes that job outright. Now, the team signed Joe Tryon-Shoyinka this offseason, which made me think like he might be first up on the depth chart to get it. But this is what's interesting is the Browns feel that guys like Isaiah McGuire and Alex Wright both have started to turn that corner in terms of providing a spark, maybe getting more usage, maybe seeing more time as a starter on opposite of Myles Garrett. And both these guys are like developmental players, right? Alex Wright was a 3rd-round pick in 2022. He's going into now his 4th year with the franchise, because and then you got Isaiah McGuire, who was a 4th-round pick in 2023, going into his 3rd year. And both those guys have had sort of a runway here to improve and get better and show what they can do. I think they have carved out nice roles for themselves. I think they'll at least be part of the rotation, obviously. But can one of them sort of seize this moment and take that starting job is the question that I have going into veteran minicamp, going into training camp, all those different things. And I think it's going to be an interesting competition between both those guys to do that. The Browns would love if a young guy like that, somebody that they drafted, Andrew Berry especially, we talk about how he hasn't hit on so many of his draft picks over the years. If he can get a 3rd-round pick like Alex Wright to turn into a starting caliber player that, yes, will still rotate, but is a starting caliber player, that's a feather in his cap. Same thing with Isaiah McGuire as a day 3 guy. Like, if he can get him to really stick, I think there's some reason to believe that, they're hoping that that's the case. For a team that's in rebuild, you want your young guys, you want your draft picks to carve out roles for themselves, because that helps you supplement the roster more quickly and turn this thing around faster. So I think they're really banking on those two guys taking the next step. Alex Wright, I thought, was playing some really good football at the start of last season before the torn, was it a tricep? I'm trying to remember. Yeah, torn tricep, in week 4. And then he missed the rest of the season. Like, I think there's some expectations for him to maybe continue turning that corner and taking that next step. Isaiah McGuire, maybe a little less or so as a 4th-round guy, but still showed some promise last year, filling in a bunch at that spot, especially once Zadarius Smith was gone. And that's the biggest thing. Like, in previous off seasons, you have kind of had a clear picture of who that guy's going to be. It was Zadarius Smith the last couple of years. You had Jadeveon Clowney for a stretch of time before that, where you knew who the guy opposite of Myles Garrett was going to be, and everybody else was, just depth pieces. This year is the first year where that spot is kind of wide open. And it might end up just being Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, who I think has shown in his NFL career that he can be a pretty steady player and have a pretty steady presence at that spot, especially opposite of Myles Garrett. And especially when you throw somebody like Mason Graham into the mix, who's going to demand a lot of attention himself and allow the opposing offenses to have to sort of prioritize where they're blocking guys. And that might open up somebody like an Alex Wright or a Joe Tryon-Shoyinka to sort of do some damage on their own, because they're going to have some more free reign to do some things. So I'm fascinated by this one. At the end of the day, we know that Jim Schwartz is going to rotate guys. That's how defensive lines work today in the NFL, but especially in his system. Very much of the ilk of the Philadelphia Eagles, right? They come in waves. It's not just 1 or 2 guys. And so that's going to be a staple of this defense once again. But along those lines, if who earns like the starting spot is going to be an intriguing thing to follow, an intriguing storyline and position battle to follow throughout training camp leading up to the season. And I actually think behind the quarterback position is probably the most intriguing spot to be paying attention to see who emerges on top and takes that role opposite of Myles Garrett, which is an important one. It's a crucial one for this defense to know who's going to have some opportunities to do some things and play a supporting role to one of the best defensive players in the NFL. Is 2025 the swan song for David Njoku? We'll talk about that coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. All right, we know the Browns are at a bit of a crossroads when it comes to a number of their veteran players. Nick Chubb is the notable name from this offseason that it seems like they are not going to be bringing back this year, much to the dismay of maybe you and other Browns fans. And I understand that. But they also face those tough conversations with some other players, including along the offensive line, guys that could retire, like a Joe Bitonio. Jack Conklin could be done after this year. He's going to the last year of his contract now. But another name that I think is an important one to pay attention to in terms of what the future looks like for this player in Cleveland is David Njoku. This conversation starts from the fact that, yes, they drafted a tight end. They theoretically drafted his replacement, his successor at some point, right? The guy who's going to hopefully seize the moment and take over as the number one tight end on this team down the line. He's a 20-year-old kid. He's got a chance to really blossom and learn and develop into his body, into his role in the NFL and find some success. And so Harold Fannin Jr. is kind of the future here. And so what does that mean for David Njoku's future? I think is an interesting question that this team is faced with going into this upcoming season. We know that the Browns met with David Njoku's reps during the pre-draft process. They went down to see Cam Ward in person in Miami, and Njoku's reps were there. Njoku works out a lot of the time there during the offseason, and they were able to have some conversations, which made it seem like they're talking about maybe re-signing him. And I do believe that the Browns want to re-up with David Njoku. I think they see him as part of their future plans, at least for now. Hell, I mean, he's only 2 years removed from a Pro Bowl season, and I think they saw that. He finally got to that plateau, and they said, look, we think that guy's in there. We think he can do that consistently. He needs to stay healthy. He needs the right quarterback situation. He can't help that it has been a carousel of quarterbacks parading into that room and trying to make it work with him over the last couple of years. And that he had his Pro Bowl season in one of those years once he got some steady quarterback play from Joe Flacco. And if you go back and look up his 2023 numbers, like a lot of his best games, his best performances, the games that put him over the top to be a Pro Bowler came with Flacco. So there's a chance that if like somebody like Flacco wins the job, he could sort of settle back into having that type of success again. But the fact is, like, he did take a step back last year. And whether that was the injuries, because he was in and out of the lineups constantly because of injuries, and I think that was a big factor, or if it was something else, he just looked a little slower last season. He didn't quite look like himself. He didn't look totally in shape the same way David Njoku normally does in some respects. So this year is about getting back on track for him. He has to get back to being at least a borderline Pro Bowler and show that production is still in there for the Browns. And listen, I also think it can't be understated here how important he is as a blocker on this team. I've talked about that already in relation to Harold Fannin, because the biggest knock on him is that he wasn't this like inline blocker a lot of the time. And they don't know if he can do that at the NFL level, especially at his size. But I think about David Njoku, who's more of the prototypical tight end size, yes. But when he came to the NFL, you know, he didn't hit it off so great with Stefanski and this regime early on in their time together. He didn't want to be a blocking tight end. He didn't like that they had brought in Austin Hooper to sort of mooch off of his receiving numbers. And he had to kind of buy in. And now him and Kevin Stefanski have a great relationship. He is bought in, and he's become one of the best blocking tight ends in football, on top of being, again, just a couple years removed from being a Pro Bowler. Like, he has sort of delivered that full package of in terms of being that player that the Browns thought he could be. And that's awesome news for Cleveland as they hope to find that again in his game, So like, I think they believe that player's still in there. And so because of that, I think they want to bring him back and keep him around for at least a little bit longer. And in that respect, I don't think this will be his quote unquote swan song season with the Browns, but he absolutely has to get back on track. And that's what 2025 is about for him. If he goes out and he puts up borderline Pro Bowl numbers, or he is a Pro Bowler again, I think they will absolutely bring him back and re-sign him, re-up with him, and find a way to get a deal done so that he can continue being part of this franchise, continue mentoring Harold Fannin Jr., who's, again, going to get to learn from a good one here in Cleveland about how to play the tight end position, the nuances of that role in the NFL. Like, it's a great situation for him. So I think that's what they want, how they want this thing to go. But he has to go out and basically prove it on the field, I think, first. It also helps that someone like Flacco, as I said, may end up starting under center, at least for some of the season. We don't know how this is all going to shake out. The quarterback competition, as I said at the top of the show, is going to be the most watched part of this offseason for the Browns without question. And who emerges as the starter week 1 is something everyone's going to be tapped into. So, however, if Flacco comes out and he is the starter to begin the year, and then maybe they move off of him later, that at least bodes well for somebody like David Njoku if he can stay healthy, because he knows with Flacco he has the chemistry. He knows with Flacco he's going to look to the tight end. He knows with Flacco he can put up those numbers because he did it with him once before in literally just a 5-game stretch together, which is pretty remarkable when you think about it. So, like, that could be the thing that maybe unlocks David Njoku earning that next contract with the Browns and setting the tone for, we are going to bring him back. So I'm sitting here today in May thinking that this isn't the end for David Njoku, but I do think a lot of this hinges on his ability to go out and just perform. It's like every situation in the NFL. What have you done for me lately? Are you performing? Like, if you're not, we have your replacement waiting in the wings. That's life in the NFL. I'm sure David gets that to some degree, but he's got to go out, stay healthy, do it on the field. Consistent quarterback play would certainly help. And I do think he's poised to do that. And I think they believe that's still in there. But until that point, I don't know that they're going to re-sign him. And I think if he goes out and does it, though, he's back with the Browns and continuing to play an important role in this team, even with Harold Fannin Jr. sort of waiting to take that baton from him at some point and be the number 1 tight end on this team down the line. Another episode, Down with Your Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me, as always, to talk about your favorite football team. Plenty more to come this week, including a conversation about Kevin Stefanski developing talent. And one thing that we need to set the record straight on when it comes to Shedeur Sanders. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get more content like that coming up in the days ahead, and make Locked On Browns your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting, or you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs, Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. See you.